It's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, everyone. Well, I think we need a breather, don't we? A hectic 30 games in 7 days concluded this afternoon with a fairly interesting last couple of games. Chelsea being held to a draw at the last minute by Sheffield United. Ooh, who's got double Chelsea defence? Not me. Not me. Oh, wait, no, I do. And Spurs winning 3-1 against Nottingham Forest. Those games playing almost in parallel, I believe, due to the Sheffield Marathon or something like that, pushing the Spurs game a bit later. The Chelsea game a bit later, and with us down to earth, still on the high. I'm not really too sure after wildcarding in game week 30. But it feels like a long time ago, but it was literally only just a week ago. I'm Tom. I'm here with a beer. I'm still on holiday next week, but I've been up since 6 again and busy with family all over the weekend, basically. My daughter's won on Tuesday, so it's been relatives galore, lots of stuff going on, and frankly, I'm knackered. But not knackered enough to not want to chat FPL for a good while with you guys, and especially Sam, who's here as always. I hope you're good, mate.
Yeah, all good. Thanks, Tom. Hope you've had a good weekend. And any of you listening, especially if you're tuning in live, hope you've had a good weekend too. We are, as always, Who Got the Assist on today's pod, since we're really beginning to get into the midst of having to make tough decisions as we reach the double season, of course, with 3 double game weeks to come. Do we stick with the proven quality, or is it time to twist into fixture-led picks? That leads us nicely into the big questions ahead of game week 33, setting up for a double or moving into a free hit in 34. We'll split the community in terms of the players we're buying and selling. So that's a really important thing that we'll be covering, both of those for key transfers in, of course. And then, of course, also best captain for this week. Can we look past Haaland versus Luton? I know he scored 5 earlier this season against Luton in the Cup, so it might be quite tempting to go there. But it is Sunday, the 7th of April. The games have finished, so the ranks are locked in. The scores are locked in. So with that, shall we move across to scores on the doors, Tom?
Yeah, all right, let's do it. It's literally just all happened. I was put my daughter to bed during the Spurs game, yeah, I mean, as I was going upstairs with her to put her to bed, I was thinking, this game week, there's not really much that's gone on. I really need kind of basically Porro to do anything for it to go well. And lo and behold, as she was rolling around before she fell asleep, I got a text from you saying enjoy, and I was just like, And then I looked and I was like, oh, Porro's done a goal. Right? I can't react to this because I've got to be quiet while she sleeps. And then I went downstairs, I was like, yeah, because I mean that's a huge goal, and it just shows how, I guess, razor thin the margins are, really, both between you and I, because we both wildcarded into fairly similar teams. I didn't go with Anana, we were discussing, weren't we? I went for a cheaper goalkeeper in Areola, who's now injured, just so I could keep Porro, just because I thought he was statting well. But I mean, there was definitely a really good case for Udogie as well, and it's just kind of proved that this week Porro, he'd been rushing into the box like that quite a fair bit, and just kind of I got my reward, I guess, this week after. I think there was a significant miss last week as well, and there've been a few near misses from Porro, so good to get that 11. But elsewhere, it was a really sort of, I guess, bread and butter week across the board. A few blanks here and there. Isaac, Petrovic in goal, obviously. Mr. Gusto didn't play, so Conor Bradley with his yellow card came in. Luckily got subbed before Liverpool conceded the second goal. That really nice picture of a goal by Kobe Mainoo, actually. I say it's bread and butter, but there were returns for most of the men that you'd expect to return effectively. So Gabriel with the clean sheet, Saka with the penalty, so 10 points scored there. Interested to get the update from the listener, Sam, whether you did remove him or not. Salah with the penalty too, Son with the assist for Van der Ven, and Haaland as well with the goal. Yeah, Semenyo, I think, was my kind of main differential, other than Pedro Porro. Brought him in to the first team after the news coming through that Foden wasn't playing. Unfortunately, blanked and got an XGI of 0.01 in the game, so bit of a letdown, but hey ho, I'm going to take it, especially with just the assist from Cole Palmer. Again, was hoping for a bit more, but he got subbed off in the kind of the 75th, 76th minute, something like that. So not the optimal captain this week, but over the last 3 weeks, so since I wildcarded, it's not been sort of through the roof in terms of overall gains. I've gone up a massive 18k places in 3 weeks. It's not really been massive, but the key thing, I suppose, between game week 29 and 30, that jump I've kind of managed to retain. So from 225k up to around 150, and that's kind of been quite good. And I'm hoping that kind of now moving forward, I'm able to maintain that and continue to push upwards. It's been a couple of weeks of kind of meager green arrows, so hopefully kind of maybe 33, but definitely 34 when we both deploy the free hit. That'll be the week where kind of proper gains are made and we can shave a digit off those overall ranks. What about you, Sam? How do you get on?
Frustrating. You're now above me, I think, for the first time this season. So we've got a switch in positions on our hands here. Pretty late in the game as well, so it's frustrating to lose my spot now. But 154k, I think I'm 2 points behind you. Obviously, the Adogi versus Poro swing was pretty...
Nothing in it, is there?
Yeah. So obviously, the Adogi versus Poro... change, the difference there is why the swing has occurred. I did keep Saka, so he's still in. I've still got 2 free transfers. Obviously, in part due to the fact that we got the early tip off that Foden wasn't going to be starting, so that pretty much locked in my move. I think I messaged you before that leak privately that I'm probably just going to leave it. That moves like that tend to blow up in my face, and it definitely would have. I'd be even further behind if I'd made that move, so I'm glad I didn't. But Saka going off again with another knock is maybe yet another slight mark against him. So it's something that we need to talk about today, I think, regarding Bukayo, especially as we're both on the free hit 34 strategy. Outside of that, 6 out of the 7 attackers getting some sort of return, but none of them really exploding. Palmer obviously could have, or we wanted him to get a bit more than he actually did. Salah and Saka both getting the penalty, but obviously it's points against me for Salah and Haaland as well. So frustrating game week. It's starting to erode the initial progress I made on the wild card, but I'm still up overall. Just don't want to make a habit of too many more red arrows before the end of the season, and hopefully get back in a winning groove in game week 33 before the free hit. And of course, we've got a couple of issues to sort out with transfers on this side of the free hit. And then all of a sudden, it's all going to come thick and fast on the other side of it with only a couple of free transfers between then and 37 as well. So moves need to be made. But overall, bit of a frustrating game week, defined by narrow margins, as you say.
Yeah, razor thin. Like one player, if you had Poro over Udogie, that's quite a significant green arrow, isn't it? By kind of 3 or 4 points. So yeah, really, really small. Really interesting that we're so close. Really, I mean, maybe it's not that interesting because we've got our own little bubble between us. It seems in terms of coming to similar conclusions. But nonetheless, I think that. It'll be interesting to see kind of how we go. I'm sure they'll just be kind of, I'm sure it will just be kind of that going forward because we're both following broadly the same strategy. There's going to be a few players that one of us likes over the other. So Poro versus Udogie. Talk about Dallo later on, for example. I quite like him. Was scouting the second half of the game. Got home for the second half of the game today. Quite like him and quite like what I saw. So he may be on the table for me. If not this week, but in the future. So little things like that, I think, are going to be what kind of dictates it. But broadly, I think we'll be moving in the same direction over the rest of the season, which hopefully is going to be up. But to move on to our sort of main topic this week, it's going to kill your darlings, or is this against your better judgment, as you've titled it? I guess it's time for.
I couldn't get away with the word "kill" on YouTube; it would have downgraded us.
Unalive your darlings.
Yeah,
I keep seeing that on TikTok as well. Like, blah blah, unalived. Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a discussion.
Or just the skull and crossbones.
Yeah, it's not good, is it? But yeah, it's a bit of a chat as we draw a breath after the kind of the hectic period we've been through, because the time to execute our plans is forthcoming. We need to make some tough decisions as we hit this crunch time, and it will come at different times depending on the path you're on. So, as you know, we're on free hit 34. So for us, it's pretty imminent in terms of making a culling, and it's going to kind of continue going forward. In our situations, I think, we're both looking at someone like Saka, for example, in order to fix a few things and also to prepare ourselves going forward. So we've both got 2 free transfers now, and we've got a free hit next week, so we can't roll the second free transfer over. So we've got to take the 2 now, use it or lose it, and we've got to use it because at the end of the day, we've got a little bit of prep to do ahead of the 37 bench boost. But if you're on wildcard 35, of course, you've got a little bit of a grace period. You're still going to be building towards that 34, and you're still able to take some of those punts. So players like Bumo that we spoke about last week come onto the table for you guys much more than they do for us. For this week, although Sheffield United, there seems to be confounding expectations when it comes to high-profile players playing against them. But yeah, I suppose the main sort of comment here, Sam, is judging by what I've said, there is going to be and we'll also kind of look into it in terms of the game week preview, a bit of a divergence, isn't there, in terms of FPL managers, engaged managers now, all dictated, I think, by when you've used that free hit. And that is going to impact so much. Like, it could even be that we're buying players, people are selling, and vice versa, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Arsenal and Liverpool will be the catalyst for this. Obviously, going to be very, very popular on a free hit 34. And for anyone wildcarding in game week 35, they're probably loading up on them right now. The crucial thing for them is getting to the correct ones ahead of time. Whereas I suppose for us, we don't really care about buying, selling them ahead of time. We just need to make sure on the week we get the right ones. That also might leave us exposed to certain longer term picks. For example, double Arsenal defence will probably be quite popular amongst those on the wildcard 35 strategy, just for the simple fact that they've probably held on to double Arsenal defence, whereas we're probably going to be moving away from Arsenal defenders, or just Arsenal generally speaking. Obviously, we'll come on to Saka as well, and just focusing on the free hit, where potentially we might only be looking at 1, if not even 0 Arsenal defenders to attack the upside, as it were. Although I think personally 1 is probably fine for me. I don't think I could go with 0. I think it seems a little bit too risky after seeing what they're capable of in defence. But yeah, so that's a perfect example of people probably split camp there on whether or not you're actually buying Arsenal players or getting rid, and probably quite similar with Liverpool, but maybe a little bit more restrained, just because we don't necessarily know which Liverpool players are going to be ready by 34 at this point. Maybe it's wiser to wait an extra week there to figure out who you want to buy, just for the sheer fact Alisson could be back instead of Kelleher, Trent could be back instead of Bradley. Who knows if Darwin's going to continue to be slightly frustrating or not, and Luis Diaz looks great as well. So yeah, there's lots of decisions to be made, and honestly, we're probably looking at selling Liverpool players and Arsenal players, whereas the crowd that are wildcarding in 35 are probably going full steam ahead into them right now.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're planning for that wildcard 35, player purchases are going to be super short term this week. That's kind of the way it is. And as I said, you can afford to kind of take a punt almost on kind of very, very short term bets. And if you're planning for 34, as you mentioned, Sam, like player purchases are more long term, and it's kind of quite definite almost. Like you're buying players thinking, I'm not going to remove them now. That'll be it. And that creates a really interesting dynamic and different focuses depending on the pathway you were on. So if you're on wildcard 35, as you've mentioned, you've got the Arsenal Liverpool impetus, obviously bringing those players in. And I suppose you'd also be starting to get on, I'm sure many of you have got like Ryan Ait-Nouri, but there's also going to be other sort of edge pieces coming in, and kind of as you referenced, Sam, in terms of the Liverpool situation, for example, the key benefit for you if you are on wildcard 35 is that you've got that. I guess you've got a bit more information to bring those players in, and also you've got the information on the other side of 34. So you're dead ending into 34, knowing you'll be getting rid of a few of these players, right? And you'll be able to kind of have a better idea of the players that you want to bring in terms of Sam's fabled edge pieces idea. I'm only thinking about this from my own kind of personal perspective now, but looking at my wildcard, right, I've got 3 players who are all kind of definable as those sort of edge pieces, the ones you don't really care about, but do come into the equation when it comes to bench boost, who are now all questionable. And like Conor Bradley, I was going to get rid of him at some point, right? And Lascelles, who was the cheapest player that I had, if you've been listening to me for a long time, you'll know that I'm always kind of saying, don't put yourself down a cul-de-sac. And lo and behold, what have I done? I'm down a cul-de-sac with the cells. I really can't get rid of him one move this week without killing one of my darlings, selling one of the players who play for Liverpool or play for Arsenal in order to get rid of him going forward. Areola as well. I think I can leave that one until kind of game week 37 or so. And also Gusto, Potts said he was okay, but another one to sort of monitor. And I've still got, Semenyo hanging around, who was always going to kind of be there. He facilitated me keeping Foden, for example, which obviously did help me out a lot last week and helped me keep Porro, which helped me out a lot this week. But it's another kind of move I've got to make. Whereas when you're in 35, you didn't have to think about all these things a few weeks ago. You can still keep on going through and still just kind of play quite a logical game. Whereas for us, I suppose, Sam, we are looking at a few teams who are maybe not exactly a paragon of quality in terms of who they are compared to the players we are looking to be selling. So Man United and Newcastle are obviously falling into our scope a lot more than they were before. And in 35, Man United have got Burnley at home, Newcastle, Sheffield United at home, and then the next week, Man United are away at Palace, which is an okay game, but Newcastle are away at Burnley, which again is a very good game. And then they've obviously both got the 37 double. So we're going to kind of do a bit of a time shift from 33 to 35, with 34 being a bit of a void because it's free hit. And we've got to think about these players now. Whereas if you guys are wildcarding into 35, you don't have to worry about that right now. So I think it's a really fascinating dynamic, isn't it? And there's certainly kind of, I suppose, opportunity if you're in the 35 wildcard bracket. And to some extent, I almost kind of wish I was, just because it feels a bit more logical now to be doing that. Whereas for us, as mentioned, killing your darlings, we've got to do that so much sooner. And to turn the page over to the face of my star boy, Bukayo Saka, who, I neglected most of the season, only got him back last week, didn't play, and now this week he scored a penalty, and now I'm looking at getting rid of him. And it's gonna hurt because his EO is still stupidly high, despite the fact he drops in price, which is incredibly annoying. But going forward, his EO is going to still really hurt. It's 60-70% around both of our ORs, so players like that, even though we've got to do it now, in 35, everyone else is going to have to also encounter this problem. It's just that we've got a bit more exposure. And that in itself, I guess, Sam, is a little bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a risk that we both decided to take on the game week 30 wildcard. I think the short-term upside was there, so I don't regret doing it. But it was a risk that we had to be aware of, that at the end of the day, we're booking in transfers ahead of time for any players that don't have that double in game week 37. So players that we wanted to keep on the wild cards without the double in 37 were naturally going to be the very best players that otherwise we really wouldn't want to get rid of. So there was always going to be a moment of pain, and we just have to time it correctly. And the problem is, if we do it on the wrong side of the free hit 34, where we've only got a couple of free transfers to do it in, the wildcarders in 35 obviously can completely reshape their team, get rid of a lot of them at a later point, whereas we have to start getting rid of at least one or two of them now, before getting to the same point as them. And again, that leaves us exposed to other risks, like the players we bring in getting injured or getting rotated or being flight risks for one reason or another, or the players that we get rid of being as good as they are, going off in the one game week that we are getting rid of them ahead of game week 35 wildcarders. So, for example, luckily for us, it hasn't hurt us. But one example that could have hurt a lot more was Ollie Watkins. Now, obviously, the injury meant that by the time he did haul and get the 2 goals in this game week, the EO was low enough that it didn't really kill us. But if things had gone against us, or if he had just stayed fit, his EO at this point probably still would have been 40 or 50%. So that's a risk that we took. We got away with it because of the injury. But that's just a really good example, I think, of what can go wrong in the situation we're in, getting rid of players we know are objectively very good players who are going to score points. I don't think anyone's contesting the fact that Salah, Saka, Arsenal defence, even other Liverpool attackers are going to do well at points between now and the end of the season. It's just whether or not we back the players with doubles to come in and do a better job for us with the extra matches they've got. And we're taking a risk doing it ahead of time, which is the problem with wildcarding slightly earlier. Although it has to be said that there were other benefits, like the fact that my team was an absolute mess at the time. So I needed to get rid of quite a few of the edge pieces, as you mentioned earlier anyway. So yeah, it's interesting. There are risks, but we've only got one more game week now of exposure before the free hit, and then the wildcard 35 comes into it. And then we're all kind of on a bit of a level playing field again. Obviously, they'll have the advantage of more information.
Yeah, exactly. And, everybody is going to be debating this at some point. Do I remove Arsenal players? Which ones do I remove? How do I make it work? You've got probably most teams, Saka at the moment sat there. I know some people remove Saka. I know FPL General, for example, removed Saka for Odegaard this week. But I mean, there's going to be some level of Arsenal attack kind of sat around. If you've owned Kai Havertz, by the way, bravo, whacker. And there's going to be defenders almost everywhere. There's going to be at least Gabriel, and I suspect most people have now gone in with double defense. And from that point onwards, from 35 onwards, they don't have any doubles left. Decent game against Bournemouth in 36 at home, and then the final game is pretty decent as well. Everton at home, but in between that, the fixtures aren't as fantastic. We're gonna own them on free hit. There's the Aston Villa game coming up, within which I think both of us are going to be reducing exposure. But by game week 35 for the Spurs, for the North London derby, a game which is kind of classically fairly high scoring, I suspect you will see those ownership numbers drop significantly. So everybody's going to be thinking about this at some point between now and the end of April, effectively. And I think what's really interesting is kind of just, I suppose, if we are kind of dwelling on Arsenal for a second, because they're a really good sort of case study, I guess, for the situation we find ourselves in terms of killing our darlings. I mean, I haven't owned Gabriel for very long, but I know those people out there have owned him since the start of the season, and you must kind of absolutely love what he's given you over the course of this year. Goal threat, could have scored twice this weekend, honestly. A couple of really good chances. Oh well, yeah, like the really early one, mate. I was up. I thought he scored, honestly.
From certain angles, it looked like it was going across the goal and in. Yeah,
and towards the end of the game as well, there was one where he came steaming in from another corner, and you just thought, oh, if he just the contact is right on this is going in, but not quite. And obviously Saka as well. So I've had quite a checkered history of Saka. If you've been listening all season, you know this. But he has been in my team for most of the correct points, luckily. But these darlings are going to need to be killed at some point, probably, almost definitely. And there'll be a little voice in your head saying, you know what, oh, they've done so well for me over the course of the season that I'm going to keep them. And you could well think that. I said a little while ago when I was espousing the case for the 34 bench boost and 37 free hit, for example. Well, these guys have been performing all year. Removing them is going to be a bit of a problem. But the higher up in the ranks you go, the lower the EO is going to get, I suppose, as time continues. Which one are you going to kill? Is my question, Sam. Who's going to get the knife? I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to be more likely to keep Gabriel for longer than I will Saka. Purely because there are more options on the table for replacing Saka than there are for Gabriel, and also the combined effective ownership that Gabriel represents in the Arsenal defence is going to be a lot more painful if they keep a clean sheet than if Saka scores, because I'm basically betting against Saka, which I don't really like doing. But in terms of the strategy that I've got, and in terms of the team situation that I've got, based on the strategy that I've got, that seems a logical move to make. Are you kind of about there? And as I said, you may not be thinking about this right now, but you're going to be thinking about this in game week 35 if you're wildcarding, then that's for sure.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I completely agree with you. I've come to a very similar conclusion that with Gabriel, and there's another edge piece there that I want to come on to, but for now, Gabriel doesn't just represent an Arsenal player, he represents Arsenal defence generally, and the exposure of going against him early is not just he's going to get points, it's also the other Arsenal defenders that are going to hurt you as well. At the moment, just with Gabriel, you are losing rank on the clean sheets that they get, because overall the combined ownership of White, of Saliba, of the rest of the Gabriel owners and Raya as well is enough to mean that you're on a red arrow off of just purely the clean sheet of just having one Arsenal defender. That will still be relatively high by the time we get to game week 35, 36. Whereas with Saka, yes, the EO will probably remain fairly high and it will drop slowly, but it'll probably stay around 40, 50%, I would guess, at around game week 35, 36. But with him, you can probably battle against it with the likes of Gordon, with the likes of Foden, with the likes of another Spurs attacker with a double in 35 and 37. So with some of these players, you've got 4, if not 5 fixtures versus Saka's 3. And if he keeps getting taken off early with little knocks and things like that, then maybe it's even more likely that you're going to get away with it. The other final piece I want to mention on Gabriel is that you came on to a really good point, or were coming on to a good point about the fact that I've lost my train of thoughts there. So I'll go back to that in a second. The first thing I want to mention before I forget it is that the double game week in 35, rather than going into 36, actually makes the appeal of keeping Gabriel slightly more appetizing to me because of the home game against Bournemouth in 36. Now there isn't the double game week that week. He is going to be very valuable as that single game week defender. It's one of the best weeks to have an Arsenal defender. Whereas if the Spurs Chelsea double had gone into there, then okay, fine. 35 is Tottenham. 36, you're probably arguably benching him anyway because you've probably got 1 or 2 Chelsea defenders or a goalkeeper. Same with Spurs, and then you've only got to really lock in one other spot. Whereas now, Gabriel in 36 is going to be incredibly valuable because he'll be the best defender to own that week. So it's another reason to leave that till the last minute. Also, any other defenders that you get in for him right now, I don't think you're really banking a clean sheet in 33. So you might as well wait a little bit longer, in my view, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, Gabriel is like leagues ahead of the next highest pure defender in terms of XG.
Yeah.
He's on 4 this year, and I think that was kind of one of the main sort of pros for him at the start of the season before Timbergate and him not playing the first game and sort of swapping over to Saliba at the last minute. But so it's proved again. I mean, Matt Cash is slightly ahead of him, but he kind of plays not really. He's not a pure defender because a lot of the time he's deployed in midfield. And you know, the next highest proper defender, I don't know if we can count Aït-Nouri there as well because of the recent role he's been playing for Wolves. Next highest defender is kind of Lewis Dunk at 3 XG, so a whole XG below him. And then you've got Ahmed Hodzic at Sheffield United, actually. He's the next highest pure defender. But I think, yeah, bang potential. Ahmed Hodzic, you've heard it here first. He's going to be the highest scorer. And someone's got a bold claim. I'll bold claim that. Don't care. I'm way ahead. But yeah, I agree with that, and I think that, you know, the main shift of the 35 double becoming a double has kind of heightened the importance of keeping Gabriel. But Saka does feel like a darling that we're probably going to both have to execute, unfortunately. And it's going to be the case that with Villa, we're hoping it's not going to be the same performance that we saw versus Man City. It's not going to be the same team that we saw versus Man City. I don't know whether, you know, I don't think that we're going to be able to lean really too heavily on, he could be an injury doubt or something like that. We'll see, obviously, midweek what happens against Bayern and things like that as well. But I've got no doubt that he starts that game, unless obviously by the time he listens to this, it's been dated and he's been injured, which obviously I hope he's not because I love the man. But these sorts of decisions are going to need to be made fairly soon for us. And also, if you're wildcarding in 35, you're going to make the same decision. I'm fairly sure. I completely understand why you'd keep him, but also I can understand why you sell him. It's one of those where if you post your team on X and say, I've sold Saka, you'll get loads of kind of negative energy. But it is what it is with this sort of thing. And I suppose that would also extend to Liverpool. I suppose the defence is probably less of a worry in terms of removal. So if you've got, I'm assuming it's Van Dijk, we'll come on to kind of specifics later on, third best defence in terms of XGA or SGC this year. Everyone's kind of miles and miles behind the Arsenal defence,
That's the thing.
as anyone who's been watching Arsenal play would know. But yeah, you've got mainly Salah. I think that Darwin. I don't think anyone's going to be particularly kind of sad to see the back of him. You've owned Luis Diaz for the last few weeks. I know that Sonaldo on X has owned him for the last few weeks and had a lot of fun with him. Maybe there is some semblance of him being a bit of a darling for you. Obviously, Trent's been out of the equation, but he might have been one as well where we would have been thinking about, right, what do we do with Trent now if our teams were configured to have him in and he was kind of fit and firing like he has been in days gone by. But I guess with Salah, Sam, especially for wildcard 35, that is going to be a big question for a lot of people. And for us, I think it is going to be a keep for the time being. The underlying numbers, despite the fact that he's not converting them, are still pretty ridiculous. I mean, yeah, a very quiet game against Sheffield United. But either side of that, like an XG in both for the Brighton and Man United games with above 1. It was 1.5 against Brighton for the shots he took. An XGI of near that as well. Obviously, there's a penalty involved in the in the previous game, in the game just gone. But nonetheless, a player who's always going to be kind of fear-inducing. Perhaps not as well as Saka this year, actually, but still this week, ventured over the 100% EO mark. And another darling who, due to the fact that he doesn't have a double in 37, and also due to the fact that his sale releases loads of money to basically boost your team, supercharge your team into a 37 monster. That just means that basically he's in line to be cold pretty soon, isn't he? And I think that anybody wildcarding 35, you're thinking, you know what, I might just get rid of him now rather than waiting until kind of 36 when we're going to be doing it. Although that West Ham game, I mean, we've said a few weeks ago, didn't we? West Ham further from bottom in terms of XGC for the season. It could be quite good for us if we keep him. But I can imagine him being sold by a lot of people because selling him obviously unlocks so much, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I completely agree with everything you're saying there. He is basically the piggy bank, as we discussed last week, to get to a really strong bench boost in 37. And obviously being able to unlock some of the slightly more expensive assets that otherwise we couldn't do. So initially, obviously, we both hoped Lascelles would be fit and firing for 37. That's not going to be an option. So taking out Salah almost becomes a necessity at that point to make sure that we bolster that 14th, 15th man in the squad to make sure that we get out a good playing 15 that week. Trippier, for instance, could be a nice little option to pick up in game week 36, 37 by getting rid of Salah, for instance. So there are a lot of positives to doing it. I definitely wouldn't want to do it just yet, and I'll leave it as late as I possibly dare before getting rid of him. Just to play devil's advocate very, very quickly on Salah, and this isn't to say I'll be doing this, but mainly just because we want to provide a little bit of balance, I suppose. Getting rid of Salah in any game week is going to be hard work. He can go off and get a great double-digit haul, even in game week 37. There's nothing stopping him from doing that. And then, of course, in game week 38, he has a great game as well and arguably could be a good captain that week. So there is an argument to remain patient, especially if you don't have a bench boost to play in game week 37. There's definitely an argument there to just put him on your bench for 1 week or just have him with lower expectations that game week as an 11th man. And even on a bench boost, having Salah with a single game week on your bench for a bench boost isn't the worst thing in the world. So I think really the benefits outweigh the negatives there of getting rid of him. The amount that you can do with your side is definitely going to be worth making the move. But I can completely understand the arguments for holding on to him. He has been the king of FPL for several years. And game week 38 isn't something that should just be forgotten about and thrown to one side just because we've got game week 37 first. Salah will do well in game week 38 as well, should they still be in a title race at that point and they're not mass rotation, which, considering where we're at with 7 games to go, I would be surprised if they're not still in and around it around that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's going to be quite a concerning sale, I think. And I think it's going to be done in 37 for us. regardless. But I think it's one that definitely needs to be borne in mind. I think I did have like one plan for keeping Salah, but it was so much jiggery pokery. I mean, you're looking at kind of having players like Verbruggen and things like that in your team to make that work. A double Bryson defense, Verbruggen, Van Hecke, giving up Højlund and having João Pedro, who we both quite like actually. But doing it that way around does kind of seem a bit forced almost.
It's a lot of compromise, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And if we kind of turn the page, I guess, to the likely lads, so the players that you will from teams you will be bringing in, thinking about, I think us and wildcarders in 35, we're both kind of doing the same thing. We're both building a team for the same game week. It's just we're a little bit further out, effectively. But we are homing in on Man United and Newcastle, and it just seems a bit weird, doesn't it, to be sat here homing in on Man United, for example, as a team that you'll be looking to target. I mean, Newcastle, fair enough, they're 4th for XG this year, not probably going to be touching their defenders apart from Trippier, but probably going to be a big sort of watch out. Hope Pope is back. But Man United, they are one of those teams that really are all about kind of fixture-led pickups, effectively. And Brighton's to a lesser extent as well. They're not teams who have been enduring, they're not players who have been an enduring picture of quality throughout the course of the season. But it's kind of like FPL necessity almost, isn't it? I suppose, to be buying these players. Although there will be those who are screaming into your earphones, into your earbuds. No, that's but just kind of thinking, oh my god, why are you selling the likes of Saka? They're proven. Why don't you stick with them rather than twisting onto these no hopers? But I suppose you've always got to kind of hope that Fitch begets form, right?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that at this point. And look, Saka, Salah, Arsenal defence are all great. I'm sure they'll score points between now and the end of the season. But with limited game weeks to go, the ones with 2 games instead of 1 are going to be the likely ones to outscore. Like most times, the double game weekers do perform. And this season has been a bit of an outlier. We've had some pretty rough and underwhelming double game weeks, but generally speaking, they do tend to work out quite nicely. And it's not like we're bringing in complete no hopers for these, like especially in midfield. I think there are plenty of other good options away from Saka and Salah, for instance, that are still decent FPL options in any given single game week as well. Not quite on the same level as those two, but as soon as you add in the factor of a double game week and good fixtures around them for Man United and Newcastle, for instance, there's actually enough there to make you think, yeah, I can probably take on Salah or Saka for a pretty short period of time and hope that the players I'm bringing in, i.e. the likes of Gordon, the likes of Palmer, who is obviously going to be in a ton of teams anyway, Richarlison, Son, you've got Bruno as well, Garnacho. There's decent options there that do get FPL points here and there and decent enough underlying data as well. So again, on a short term, you kind of back the double game weekers, especially if they've got good single game weeks around them, which a lot of these teams, especially Man United and Newcastle, do.
And sometimes it comes down to just thinking about, almost the core threat for individual players. So turning back to Saka, for example, if I don't own him this week against Aston Villa, which is kind of 60-40 on not owning him anymore, I will definitely have him for the free hit in 34. So that's 2 games. In my plan, I buy him back in 38 for the game against Everton, expecting that game to be quite well, at the moment, obviously we don't know, but anticipating that game to be quite meaningful for Arsenal. So I'm going to own him for 3 of the remaining 7 games to come, right? And they're the games, and the double game week and that game probably are the ones that I'm most worried about. 36 versus Bournemouth is probably also the game that I'm going to be hiding under the sofa for, effectively, because I'm not going to own him and I'm not going to have any plans to bring him back in for that one. But I mean that's just part and parcel of it, isn't it? Same with maybe Salah. If you don't buy him back, if you don't keep him or buy him back on your wildcard in 35, you've got West Ham in 35, Spurs in 36. Like both of those games could potentially be absolute bangers just because of the defensive capabilities or lack thereof, certainly of West Ham and to some extent Spurs, although their numbers have recovered, as we spoke about just a couple of weeks ago. But ultimately, I think killing your darlings is something that you're going to have to do sometimes, and it may be against your better judgment, but it's one of those things where it's almost just necessitated by the calendar and necessitated by the game that you play. If you are just playing a week to week, playing a fantasy challenger, if you're playing something like that, or playing a game with no double game weeks or anything kind of strategically, which is a bit of a obstacle that you need to navigate, perhaps you wouldn't really be considering that, because you just be like, right, I'm going to stick these players in, leave them for the rest of the year. But for us, there are things that we're going to have to do. We'll go on specifics in a minute, but I think that it's just necessary, unfortunately, as part of FPL. But I guess there's always that sort of feeling, Sam, isn't there, that loyalty for a player can be quite important. And you may just think, you know what, Saka's done great for me this whole season. Only since game week 1, he's going absolutely nowhere. And I think, I don't know what you think about Sam, but I completely can understand why you would think that he's absolutely staying with me. And double game weeks, as Don has just said in the chat, could sometimes be a bit of a letdown, really, overall. So stick with the players that you know and trust and who have done well for you over the course of the year. That's an impulse that's definitely understandable, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think with the likes of Saka and Salah, especially, another factor we haven't really talked about much is they're on penalties. So in any given single game week, they could easily go off without even having done anything impressive on pitch and open play. They could still come away with a 10-pointer very easily. It doesn't take a lot. And these are both teams that win quite a lot of penalties. So they can hurt. It is a risk, but we're just hoping that the players that we bring in with more games to play, and with good games at that they can hopefully outscore them. And it is a calculated gamble. I think, for what it's worth, on what Donna says, I do tend to agree that actually it's hard to remember the ones that really stand out as positive double game weeks in our past. But I think that's just kind of human nature in my experience. I do just tend to remember the worst ones, because it's the ones that brought me the most suffering, the ones that I almost try and guard myself against. Whereas the best ones, often it's crowded with a lot of other managers having a really good game week, so it doesn't stand out quite as much in your memory, because all of the managers around you have also had a good game week in terms of points, and therefore it seems like you've actually had a fairly average one. But if you hadn't have attacked that double, you would have had an absolutely horrendous game week, because you would have been 50, 60 points behind the rest of the crowd. So even though it's kind of maintained your rank, and maybe you get a little bit of a boost from it, the overall scores mean that the double game week was a massive success, and it would have been a huge mistake not to have gone for it. It just doesn't stand out in our memories as a good one, because it wasn't personally better than the rest of the crowd that week. And that's the way I think about double game weeks. It's better to be in that crowd and make sure that you are in a position to get lucky. And then if you don't get lucky, then you're kind of in the same position as a lot of other managers who also happen not to have gotten too lucky that week. And the pain isn't quite as bad, as we've seen this season quite a few times, of course.
Yeah, no, I think we all remember those amazing double game weeks. When you got 200 plus, Kane scoring 4 goals, Sanchez scoring 3 goals and get 2 assists, and that's always kind of the touchstone for what you remember in terms of double game weeks. A lot of the time, they're not great, but they're not nowhere like they were. I don't know why that is. I don't know why it's just the days of yore, but as Sam says, you're putting yourself in a position to get lucky. 2 points is better than 1, or 4 points better than 2 in terms of appearance alone. And based on that, you're kind of hoping in 1 week there's enough variance or luck that goes your way that it all makes it worthwhile. But yeah, ultimately, kill your darlings. I'm afraid it's going to happen, but kill them in a considerate way. So maybe someone like Gabriel, for example, we're both saying maybe you wouldn't be killing him. Maybe he does get spared and gets to kind of sit at your right-hand side like Alex Horn alongside Greg. Excellent. Okay, so let's move towards the Game Week 33 preview. Luckily, it's a week away, which is always quite nice. A bit of time to think about it, although we've both got 2 free transfers and a hell of a lot to think about. I kind of wanted it to be really obvious, but it definitely isn't.
No.
Should we start with bold claims? See how we're doing. So it's 8-5, and I think it's stayed that way, isn't it?
I was close, but didn't quite pull off. I didn't quite pull off the Son, Maddison, Richarlison blank. When Richarlison wasn't even in the squad, that obviously got me 1 out of 3. Maddison, again, not very impressive, and Son did actually come in clutch with an assist at least. I think he hit the bar twice as well, so could have gotten more. So unlucky, especially if you captain. Didn't quite pull it off, but 2 out of 3 isn't bad on that one.
I had 1 clean sheet across the fixtures, and I was so flipping close. It was just that Fulham couldn't score against Newcastle, and the entire
Yeah.
narrative across the week was, "Hey, Fulham are amazing at home. They never don't score." And no, it didn't quite work out, unfortunately. But
It
is
was
what
the
it is.
Everton Burnley game that you said would
I
be the
did.
clean
I
sheet
know.
game as
I
well.
know.
So you were very close.
If I was massively behind, I'd be asking you for a sympathy point, but I'm not going to here. Yeah, I'm astonished how close that actually was. I didn't obviously. I think Isaac had gone off, and I don't think he did actually. But I was actually hoping more for a goal for Fulham than I was for Isaac to score. So it just shows how invested
You're
I
really
was in that
taking
one.
this game seriously.
Well, everything else went my way, right? And I thought today, no, sod that. There's no clean sheets today. There's no way Chelsea keeping clean sheet. No way Spurs keeping clean sheet. Man United and Liverpool are both going to score 100%. So I was just thinking, well, that would have, that I think that game had gone. There had been a 1-1 as well. What my prediction was as well in the perfect score game that I play. Oh, could have been just inches away, Sam, inches away. All right, next week, our bold claims for that. You have, I think we're both actually going for a goal scored this week.
Yeah, let's put them both up on screen at once, actually, rather than doing a reveal. Yeah, we've both gone for a goal fest this week. I thought that was quite fun. I'm going absolute crazy. I'm going goal crazy in the Man City Luton game. Yes, it's between the Real Madrid ties. It's going to probably be rotation, all of that. I still think there's going to be a ton of goals, a bit like the Palace game. I think there'll be possibly goals on both ends. I can see it being a 4-2, 5-1, 5-2. Anything above 6 goals would be great. Obviously, Haaland will be a popular captain, which we'll come on to in just a moment's time. So yeah, I'm going for goal fest in that one. Which is your goal fest, Tom?
Yeah, my goal versus Newcastle versus Spurs. Don't think either of them
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean Spurs numbers have recovered, but the defending is still suspect in terms of goals being scored. Both the attacks are very good in their own ways, and in terms of the data as well, both are fairly decent attacks. Newcastle, as I mentioned earlier, 4th best overall. Spurs, I think, is 6th or 7th. Didn't take notes for that one, but yeah, I think they're kind of in and around there, and probably would have maybe have climbed up a place. I know that was all kind of very close after today, so I think that's kind of where I'm going to go. And neither of those teams can defend. I think that would be an absolute kind of goal fest. I suppose for you, you're kind of thinking that maybe one Luton goal somewhere, and then the rest would be City goals. Whereas for me, I don't know. I can't call that one.
Could be anything.
Going for like 3-2. I think I'm going for 3-2 Newcastle in my prediction league as well. So I'm backing it across both. So Lars in the chat has just mentioned this. Is Haaland getting 90 in each versus Real Madrid and rested versus Luton? So I think, I mean, let's move on to best captain for this week, and go into that. Because it is one of the kind of the key issues for the week, and everyone's going to be looking at going, well, Haaland's really obvious. I think the one thing that I would say, and it has been mentioned already, that the spacing for the City games is pretty good. It's not like a real sort of log jam. Is pretty decent. Honestly, over the next kind of few days, it's not one that worries me particularly in terms of Haaland. So Real Madrid's on Tuesday, Man City are playing Luton on Saturday, and then you've got the return game on the Wednesday, which is absolutely fine. I've got no concerns about that. And people will sometimes say, I'm not picking on you, Lars, who said that in the chat. People will often say, oh, he's being rested. Rested for what? I mean, a lot of the time, it's actually better for a player to keep playing. It keeps their rhythm up and keeps them going forward. And that is often very, very useful. The other thing that I would point out is the goal difference. So Arsenal's is 11 over City's. It's 9 over Liverpool at the moment. But a goal difference, especially in a title race this tight, is basically worth another point. And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't think that City lose any of the games remaining, which is obviously a big task for my team. but nonetheless, there's definitely the onus on them to get a big victory at some point. It may be against Luton, maybe against Brighton in 34, and we'll come on to it next week. But I think both of us have already kind of looked at free hit drafts, and both of them have kept Haaland in for that game against Brighton. But this Luton game does feel, to me, pretty plumb. Then you see what happened with Sheffield United, Saturday. What happened with Sheffield United with Palmer as well. It may be looking at it and thinking, oh, you know what? Oh, it's not as easy as it looks. But I mean, they may recover some players over the course of the next kind of week or so, but that team's been decimated. Poor old Luton. They are by a fair distance, so kind of 4. I'm sure it'll be more, a little bit more actually. XG below Sheffield United at the moment in terms of XGC, and I think City are going to have too much for them basically. And I think that you're. I don't know whether it'll be a cricket score. It may well be that we see what happened with the Arsenal game, for example, this weekend, not this week, in midweek, where they kind of get to a certain point where it's kind of 3-0 and they just kind of just pass it around, stroke it around for the next kind of 70 minutes. But it may well be that Guardiola says, you know what, this is a really good chance for us to get our goal difference up. It may be, though, in terms of Lars's question and mentions of resting, it may well be that it's not really about X minutes, but X starts. Sorry, other around. It may not be about X starts, but X minutes. So you may see, as mentioned in the past, that likes of Foden, likes of Haaland start the game, then are off kind of 60 minutes, maybe even at half time. So if they're 3-0 up at half time, Haaland's got a goal, that might be it. So that's the risk you run with captaining him.
Yeah, agreed. And I think sometimes we can overplay this in our heads, and it's easy to think this way, but Pep isn't silly. He's in a title race. He's going to want to play his strongest 11 from the start if he can. Yes, sure, one player here or there, like Foden this week, might get the odd rest, especially if they've played a lot of minutes recently. But I think they need to make sure the game's won. I don't think he's just going to think, oh, this is a done 3 points against Luton. Luton have shown some fight, and they'll want to make sure that they put the game to bed. So I would personally be relatively surprised if Haaland didn't start this game. I don't think he'll necessarily get 90, but I also wouldn't be massively surprised if he did. He's a player that probably out of all the Man City players could stay on the pitch for 90 minutes just based on the type of role that he's given in that team. I don't think he's going to need to do a ton of tracking back, for instance, or closing down. He'll be very much playing off the last defender's shoulder and making runs at opportune moments and saving any energy he can wherever possible. So yeah, look, there's always a chance. It is Pep and it is Man City. They are known to rotate sometimes, but he's an important player. They're in a really tight title race and goal difference is going to come into it. And again, the Real Madrid away game is the first game of the 2. And I think that is a factor here. That's why, again, I think I might have only talked about it privately with you, Tom, but I was actually quite concerned about Foden getting rotated in the Palace game more than the Luton game, because it felt like, okay, the Real Madrid away tie is probably the more difficult one. He's going to want to make sure that Foden, who's been so important, is fresh for that one after playing a lot of minutes. And it looks wise after the fact. I completely understand that. But okay, if that game's out of the way and if they're in even a half decent position, getting Haaland playing against Luton at home, followed by Real Madrid at home, probably isn't as taxing as doing London away, followed by Madrid away in the space of a few days. So I can completely see him starting and probably getting 80 minutes.
Yep. I mean, I think it depends on the nature of the capitulation. If there is a capitulation within the first half, then I wouldn't be surprised if he's off at half time, honestly. He's done his bit. There he goes.
He also scored 5 goals in like 60, 70 minutes in the cup against them. So
yeah. Sergio Aguero level versus Newcastle is a possibility, and that's what you're always aiming for, isn't it? Do a haul, as they say. Elsewhere, you've got Liverpool versus Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace are the 5th best team in terms of XGC. Who's 4th, Sam?
Oh, could it be Everton by any chance?
No, they're 6th. Another team so closer to our hearts.
Closer to our hearts.
I said that ironically.
It's not Chelsea, is it?
It is. Yeah,
No
fourth for
way.
XGC this year.
Can they actually just keep a bloody clean sheet then,
No,
please?
it's never happening, is it? Let's face it. Yeah, for one of the biggest underperformers, them and Chelsea actually have the same sort of level of underperformance actually in terms of their XGC versus their actual goals conceded. But anyway, I think Salah versus Crystal Palace conjures up memories of him coming off the bench
Big
to
time.
score. I think he scored a brace and got an assist.
Brace
didn't he,
and
off the bench,
assist, I think.
So I remember Nick, formerly of his parish, captained him this week, captained him that week, and was obviously really pissed off that he didn't play. And then suddenly, later on during the night, he was like, "Oh, oh my god, I've just got loads of points out of this," and it can happen. But he's going to be widely viced, whether that matters or not. But you've got to be looking at that as well and thinking, hey, some people are going to be fancying going for Salah that week, and it still stands to reason that Liverpool's XG is much better than Man City's, talking to the tune of kind of 4 or 5. Arsenal just below City's, and are a lot more sort of, I guess, attacking and open. Depends what the level of the opposition probably is what the key decider is. Really, I think a lot of the underlying XGC for Palace, as we've mentioned, was during the course of Roy's tenure when there were so many injuries, particularly to the attacking star men of Elise and Mr. Eze, that they had to basically shut up shop and just hope for the best, West Brom style. But I think that the ethos of that is still there. It's kind of the case of where the haul potential lies. Both Salah and Haaland can both haul. Maybe it can come down to the fact of just hoping it'll be all right on the night. But I think that Luton's XGC being that much worse, and there's only manager there. The players, there's loads of kind of players missing. I think that's going to be the deciding factor, really, all over the place. I guess there's also kind of maybe consideration for Son versus Newcastle as an example. Maybe you'd be thinking that Villa are going to capitulate against the top against a top 3 club again, against Arsenal, who again we've got decent-ish XG for the season, only kind of not very far behind City, so I just mentioned. So there are a few options out there, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And it could be one of those weeks where you take a bit of a calculated gamble on Haaland not getting good minutes, or God forbid him not just getting any returns, even if he does get the minutes. So Salah, Palmer, Son, all decent enough options. I think it's just quite hard to overlook that Luton home game. At the start of the season, if you put these fixtures out in front of any manager and said, look, who are you going to captain in game week 33 from the start of the season, we'd all say, well, obviously it's going to be Haaland at home to what you would think is the weakest team in the league. Obviously it hasn't transpired quite like that, but they are the worst defensively in the league, statistically at least, and they've got a lot of injuries. So I think whilst again it is maybe a slight gamble that he gets really good minutes, I would back him to get the minutes to dispatch Luton and start really returning the sort of goal threat that we expect from Haaland, which has maybe been lacking slightly in recent weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we say all this, and then someone like Kudus just smashes Fulham, doesn't he? Scores a hat trick, and
definitely. There's always one.
There's the odd couple of owners on Twitter are like, "Oh my god, this has been the most amazing game week ever," and we're kind of like, "Yeah, okay, you've just gone from 1 million to 700k. Well done, but I don't know." Cool. All right. So in terms of the best transfers turning to that, as we've mentioned a lot in the just up top, the game is diverging a lot depending on pathways, and we're going to try to give voice to the Wildcard 35 and Free Hit 34 crowds, assuming both are bench boosting 37. But if you're somewhere else, we're assuming you can get something from this. I'm sure it'll be fairly useful for you, because there'll be one kind of approach that you're gravitating towards depending on your chip situation. We'll go through it by position. I don't think there's a particular kind of goalkeeper impetus right now. If you're looking at selling Dubravka, for example, after the clean sheet, you may kind of be thinking, well, I'm just whatever, I'll just leave it. If you've got Dubravka and Areola, for example, you might just be like, oh, let's leave Dubravka in. I think there was a moment in that game where Karius was warming up, according to Twitter, and Dubravka was looking a bit sketchy, but it's probably going to be all right. But in terms of defense, I mean, if you're wildcarding a 35, so just playing through 34 double, the same as last week, probably, isn't it? I'm assuming that most of the key building blocks are probably in place for now. The key question, I guess, for me, if you don't have it already, is if you're in that situation, Sam, would you be looking at double Arsenal defense still, or would you be maybe thinking about? Obviously, we have not shown them on the screen, but the free hit 34 kind of drafts we've shared with each other. Would you still be looking at kind of double Arsenal defense, or would you maybe be kind of thinking, you know what, there maybe were some gains in getting Saka and Odegaard or Saka and Havertz, for example?
I think if I was on wildcard 35, I'm a relatively cautious manager at heart, and seeing Arsenal get clean sheets in the last 2 game weeks, in fixtures that I was maybe concerned they might not get clean sheets in, and against City, of course, as well. I think there's just enough going for it that you're like, you know what, forget the fixture. These guys are going to be tight against anyone. And they build from the back. So I would probably still be looking at double Arsenal defence if I was on that strategy. Obviously, a little bit different for us because we can attack 34 as an isolated game week. But yeah, if I was using transfers between now and 34 to set up for that week, I'd still be pretty comfortable looking at their defence, especially because there's barely any other defences that I would have anywhere near that level of confidence in.
Yeah, I agree. Benny Blanco has gone from 5.6 to 5.9 in 3 weeks.
You did it before it was cool. I'd like to think of you as a trendsetter.
I've Simpsoned this, as I've Simpsoned a lot of FPL in general. All the things people talk about, dead ending, everything like that, all things I came up with. Anyway, let's not go there. And Liverpool wise, in defence, I think that it's going to be Virgil, who's the only Liverpool player who's in consideration. However, it's not escaped my notice that Andy Robertson played the entire game today, after coming on for half an hour against Sheffield United, bagged himself an assist. I mean, we've got luxury information. So maybe by 34, he may be the one who we kind of zag with. But could he be in consideration as well, depending on what happens over the course of the week for Liverpool? Could he be the one that maybe could be a nice differential for people if you're kind of thinking, oh, Van Dijk's a bit sort of boring and obvious?
Yeah, I think if you're not convinced in Van Dijk, then yeah, Robertson for a short couple of game weeks, now that he's back fit and firing, it actually does make a lot of sense if you want to chase the upside. I think the only question mark is obviously he's been injured quite a lot this season. Is he going to have another setback? Are they going to manage his minutes a little bit? And today, maybe he played the full 90 because it was such an important game and they were trying to come from behind to get the points. So maybe it was situation dependent, but then again, he's got another week now to rest up and be ready again for Crystal Palace. It's a good fixture to start bringing in Liverpool defenders. And yeah, I think it would be either the safe, boring option with Van Dijk, although I've actually got some good memories of him in double game weeks. I think he's got a couple of bullet headers for me before. So I wouldn't mind having him. Or do you want to chase the upside a little bit more with Robertson, something with a little bit more flavour, let's say? I think Bradley and Kelleher may be too risky for me now, considering the players in and around them might be coming back soon. And also Bradley keeps getting early subs now too. So I'd be a little bit threatened by the likes of Gomez coming back in, especially if Robertson's now starting on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess for wildcard 35, I'm assuming you've got Aït-Nouri right now. If not, I mean, obviously wait and see what happens with he went off injured in the 50 something minute.
Yeah, 55 or so, yeah.
FPL General. And move on to wait and watch on. There's always lots of Craig Dawson who are good for a goal every now and again. But he's not been playing recently. And Max Kilman got a goal. Unfairly, right? I'd say, chalked off last week. But yeah, I think the options other than him are pretty good. I'm not going to say the Irishman's name, but he's played the last couple of games, so you know what he can do. Interesting stuff. That's kind of it. I think not buying Sheffield United defenders, are you? So Jayden Bogle did a goal today, so maybe we won't know. No, we're not idiots. Right, free hit 34, if you're on that. A few of the edge pieces from that time now are on the table for 37. And there are a few issues. Mentioned the cells, and you've got rid of him already. He's one that's a bit of a sore, and he may well end up kind of being dealt with this week. Connor Bradley, still got 0.1 profit in him, so maybe I want to cash that in before I get rid of the cells, who annoyingly dropped last night. But was I going to sell the cells? Mid-game week, absolutely not. So he's dropped. There you go. And there's a few options potentially on the table, I guess, for those sorts of guys. But looking at FPL review, they're telling us to rush in and buy lots of Guardiola and buy lots of Ruben Diaz. Assist defense, and again, this is relevant if you're wildcarding in 35, and we'll come on to it then too. Assist defense, you can't be going there, can you? Really? I mean, it's just not feasible right now. You can't, in all good conscience, be buying from them. So I mean, that pushes me towards, as I said, looking at Dallo from that group. I think he looked very good today. Again, admittedly, there's been bugger all end product this year. So one goal and 3 assists. He did score against Sheffield United, and they've got Sheffield United game coming up in 34, which I won't own him for. So that's irrelevant. But his SGI again, fairly irrelevant over the course of the year. Like, he's pretty much bang on for what he should be producing. But he did look quite good today against Liverpool. I was kind of watching him, thinking I would be kind of maybe looking at buying him. One of those players that is in the consideration set purely because of the circumstances we find ourselves in. I mean, other than that, Sam, where are you going to be looking if you're going to be looking to make a defensive move right now? You've got Van Hecke already, who's an obvious sort of cheap buy, and he would obviously be on the list for me. But elsewhere, I mean, there's not actually that much really for us, is there? And this is going to be an enduring problem as we head towards the 37. This is going to affect the wildcards in 35 too, by the way.
Yeah, it definitely will affect the wild card in 35. I suppose maybe the one get out of jail free card for a lot of wildcarders could be Dubravka still being an option, which we didn't think he would be by 37. If it transpires that Pope isn't anywhere near back, then they can probably save a bit of money on the keeper and maybe spend a bit more money in defence. Whereas for us, obviously, I do actually still have the sales. I sold Bradley this week, so I've still got that issue. Okay, that's all right. They're both completely irrelevant anyway at this point, so basically interchangeable. But I've got Van Hecke for Bradley. I didn't have the money in the bank to get rid of Lascelles for anyone. That's the only reason I sold Bradley first. And now it's sort of getting to the point where, okay, I've got Gabriel. I've got Lascelles. Neither of them are going to be good double game week options in 37 for one reason or another. And I think Lascelles is the more important one to get rid of for obvious reasons. I've got no money to do that with. So I'm wondering if that's another reason for me to hold on to Gabriel for that little bit longer, especially if I'm not convinced in selling him for a Man City defender around now, which I'm not. Initially, Gvardiol was the one I penciled in for this week to sell Gabriel for. I don't think I can really do that now. And I'd probably just hold on to Gabriel, maybe even hold on to him for game week 37 as well, even though it's not ideal. And maybe just look at using the money that I can gain from selling Salah to upgrade Lascelles and push him all the way up to someone like Trippier, who's now at 6.6. So I need a bit of money. I can get that from Salah, but it gives me a player with good attacking upside in a team that I don't back to necessarily get too many clean sheets. So that might be one angle I could consider rather than looking at the bargain basement defenders. The one that I would be considering if I did go down the other route would be Branthwaite, who again doesn't have a double game week in 37, but it is a very good home fixture against Sheffield United. So, and as we discussed, or as I found out on this pod, they're the 6th best defense this year. So not a bad one to be backing if you have to go after a single game weeker. And obviously he's pretty cheap as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are sort of the moves that we may have to start thinking about. I'm going to lose a doubler, but equally it kind of enables everything else and it enables me the best quality of player going forward. So that may be where you kind of go. We'll think about that one. I'll think about that one this week. In midfield, wildcard 35, same again as last week, I suppose. A couple of things here. Holding Son versus Newcastle. I mean, surely, unless you're jamming in Saka, if you don't own him, I don't think this is the week to be moving like an Odegaard in or something like that. I know Villa have obviously had a tough couple of games in terms of conceding goals, but Son versus Newcastle being how they are. Yes, they kept a clean sheet against Fulham, yada yada yada, but I'm not sure about that one. And the second Liverpool, Darwin. I mean, could you go with Luis Diaz, for example, Sam, if you're looking to build towards that 34 before you wildcard out of it?
Yeah, Diaz would be right at the top of my radar right now. If I was on that strategy, he's looked very, very good recently. He's starting to take up much more central positions, and something that I was noticing during the United game, having seen the previous few weeks' data and not really keeping a close eye on it, I was like, I'm going to really watch his positioning today. And he drifts inside a lot more than he used to without the ball. He used to be one of those players that would pick up the ball very wide left and drift in with the ball. Now he seems to be getting towards the right centre back rather than the right back in attack. So even though he's off the ball, he's coming in at the back post quite a lot and also cutting inside a lot more from a more central position as a starting point, leaving him in much better goal scoring opportunities. So yeah, he's passing the eye test massively for me right now. I think if I had a spare spot and I was on that strategy, Luis Diaz would be right at the top of my list right now. I think he's going to be quite a valuable pickup and differential as well, relatively speaking, ahead of the double.
Yeah, I like him. I think that his kind of per 90 data isn't the best in the world. I think it's kind of right down there, if I'm correct. I think he's kind of 50th, something like that, compared to obviously Salah and Darwin, who are way up overall. But I think in terms of overall,
he's no Salah, but
no, definitely not. But overall this year, like he and I remember earlier, like he, Isaac, and Gordon are all very similar around kind of, I think it's like kind of 14th. Maybe for him, maybe might be 15th. I don't know. But yeah, pretty decent, pretty consistent, and I think that's kind of what you're looking for. And he could well be kind of a picture on the free hit in 34. I mean, honestly, do I want to deal with Darwin again? That's kind of the reason why I kind of avoided it. Really, I didn't want to be a Darwin owner just because of my kind of prior experience with him. It could be that I end up with Diaz. I wouldn't be surprised if I do. It could be the way you go, honestly. And equally, you could be looking at an Odegaard, for example, as a supplement to Saka, as mentioned earlier on. If you decide to think, you know what, I'm not going to go through Arsenal double defence, I want to kind of push myself in a different direction, maybe you'd be looking at Odegaard. Although Kai Havertz has been very productive recently. Clayton on Planet FPL was saying he's got a lot more kind of explosiveness about him, and I completely agree with that. There's definitely scope for him to be doing those double digits that you need, and I think that he will be the second alongside Saka that I'll be going with on the free hit. Obviously not confirmed yet, but that'll be the way I go. Obviously this week is slightly tempered by the fact that he kind of just played the ball through and Brighton were way pushed up in terms of the high line to Trossard, who had basically a kind of a one-on-one MLS style goal at the very towards the end. But yeah, very impressive. Kai Havertz scored more goals this year than he has ever had in the past for Chelsea, I believe. No, that's not true. No, near enough, I think.
It's his best return in the season, though.
Yeah. I think all competitions he scored more goals than he had as a Chelsea player. So definitely right. on the radar. And for us, so we're looking to sell Saka. I mean, for me, it's really kind of between Bruno, Garnacho, or Gordon. I think Pascal Gross has got a good fixture against Burnley in the immediate term, but I think it kind of makes a lot of sense to kind of go with Garnacho. Obviously, frees up everything, honestly, and as you've said quite astutely when you bought him for your wild card, hey, you know what? I can own this guy You put my bench, and I'm kind of happy with it, but that's got to be kind of changing a little bit, Sam. I mean, I know this week, obviously, not the best kind of. I think he performed okay, actually. There were
Well,
a
he
couple
had
of
the goal
moments.
ruled out for offside right at
That's
the
it.
start.
That's
It
what I was
it
thinking.
was a
Yeah,
yard or two, but it was a good finish.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. There
yeah,
were a couple of
he's looked
moments
good
where I was
recently.
thinking, yeah, you must have been like, oh God. But I think at the price, I mean, it's a bit inarguable, isn't it, for 4.9? And it's only really Bruno you're going with, and you can't be looking at this week and thinking, oh yeah, Bruno's the one because he's done a goal. I mean, really? I mean, yeah, 0.001 xg, but the underlying numbers are always there for Bruno. Is kind of what you might say. It's just they're always going to be assist numbers rather than goal numbers. I think it's something like 9 xa versus kind of 5 or 6 xg last time I looked at it. I think that's probably still about right.
Mhm.
So I think it probably would be Garnacho that I go with if I was going to in terms of replacing Saka, because that just frees up everything really over the next few weeks. Like I don't need to worry about money anymore, and I can kind of just piss about of it effectively, which should be good fun. And it may well be that I end up benching Garnacho if I buy him this week. That's absolutely fine. That's kind of the nature of the beast, really, isn't it? In fact, I probably would play him this week if I did buy him, of course. But that's by the by. What would you be looking at? Would you be looking at Gordon coming back into it? Because he did really well for us, didn't he, for a little while?
Yeah, Gordon's been one of my players of the season, objectively speaking. In the period I had him, he was absolutely sensational for me. So, yeah, he's high on my thoughts, high on my radar. And yeah, if I do sell Saka this side of free hit 34, he's definitely a player I am considering. Although probably more likely to be a pickup on the other side, given the fixtures that they roll into after game week 34 is out of the way. Obviously, 2 promoted sides followed by the double. And yeah, you bring Keith's point up on the chat at the exact right time. Foden is a player that you've obviously not got to worry about. I don't have him at the moment. So if you're like me and you don't have him at the moment, if we get any sort of confidence that he gets his starting place back against Luton, he is obviously going to be high in mind. And if there is a guarantee or a very, very high chance of him playing against Luton and Saka is the transfer out, I think that transfer does make a lot of sense. So yeah, Foden would be high in mind for me, but I also really do like Gordon, and I could see myself bringing him in the next couple of game weeks as well.
And if I end up buying Bruno, for example, I'd have to settle for a Maguire, removing Lascelles.
Yeah,
I don't really
yeah.
want to be doing that, let's be honest. And to finish off forwards, wildcard 35. Surely you've got these players in place now, but if not, I think the best front three, if you are going to do 3-4-3, has to be Haaland, Solanke, and Darwin. I'm sure most people have got Haaland and Solanke. There's obviously a few holdouts on Darwin, but I think that's probably going to be the way you're going to go. I've seen a few kind of people liking Cunha, for example, which I can understand. Foot manager heroes, I mentioned, like Mateta, could come into the reckoning. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who I referenced on X of last week,
Did another goal,
scored a penalty, but the guy is the biggest underperformer in terms of XG this year, like by a long way, a long way. Before he scored last week, it was like minus 6.5. They're the closest to that. Nick Jackson, obviously 4.4. So really kind of close by. I think Everton got a decent double, if I remember correctly. So it could be one that you would like, potentially. I don't know. But I do think Haaland, Solanke, and Darwin are probably the 3 that you'd be going for right now. And yeah, I mean that kind of feels about right. Like if you haven't got Solanke, for example, I'd just be going in and getting him, really.
yeah.
Or if Man United at home is going to hold no worries for anybody who's seen Man United play over the last few weeks, and he's going to be highly owned on the free hit. Another darling potentially, Sam, who people might have to sell, especially with Brighton in 35 at home, maybe.
Which player was that? Sorry, it cut out for me just as you said.
Solanke.
Yeah, possibly. I think if you do own him at this point and you don't worry about 34, then he could be one of those players that maybe you start looking at getting rid of. You could probably hold on to him until afterwards, but yeah, I think you can probably start lining up, because if you've got Solanke, you probably don't have Isak or Højlund, someone like that. So there will be an imminent transfer there, I would imagine. I think just rewinding very slightly back to that front three, if you are on a wildcard 35 strategy, I think those are the three I would go for, unless I was on a 3-5-2. Obviously, Solanke and Haaland are the obvious two. Darwin could easily become Luis Diaz if you're on a 3-5-2 rather than a 3-4-3, and you might prefer that. You might feel a bit more confident with 5 across the middle rather than playing the 3 up front. So it might not necessarily be quite as important to have Darwin as the other two, depending on your strategy. But certainly if you are playing a 3-4-3, then those 3 probably make the most sense.
Cool. And then for us, touched on probably, but I think we're both maybe looking at selling Saka, and there's a lot to kind of think about, really. We'll get there in a little bit, won't we? Of course. For us in terms of the forward, there's not too much to really be thinking about right now. We've both got a Haaland in place, you've got Isak in place, and I suppose if you haven't got Isak yet, just get him and sort that out. But otherwise, I think we're probably fairly set, really, going forward. I think the forward transfer for me, because I'm in the 3-5-2, is one that I'll figure out later on. There is a slight consideration. I look at Højlund this week. Højlund is definitely on my mind, but I think he's definitely kind of come back from injury, was my sort of prognosis. Armchair physio. Watching him today against Liverpool, wasn't quite in the hot streak that he was in a few weeks back. So that's kind of maybe going to be one that I'll kind of leave for now. But yeah, there's a few kind of other players as well. There's João Pedro too, who may well be also of interest. But we both quite like him, haven't we? We both mentioned him in dispatches in our chats, and he could be a player who could come into view, because Brighton's double, Newcastle away and Chelsea at home on paper looks really difficult, but in reality, Chelsea's XG numbers I mentioned are pretty good, but in reality, I wouldn't be too worried about owning an attacker for both those games. It's just the rotatability with Welbeck.
Yeah,
being around.
That's the problem.
Yeah, so I think ultimately, I think it's going to be Haaland, Højlund, and Isak who are going to be the 3. And now I've said that, I can see why Dougal a few weeks ago told me to change how I was pronouncing Haaland, because I was incredibly confusing. Great. Okay, so transfers and captains for this week. Let's have a look at our bus teams to round off here. So I'm up first. Yep, I am. That's Pedro Porro. So killing my darlings, it's probably almost definitely going to be Saka who goes this week, annoyingly. I don't really want him to, but I think it's probably going to be where I go, just because I need the money to just refresh and ameliorate the end pieces. The cells almost definitely has to go, because there's going to be just a massive cul-de-sac there. I mean, Bradley, it would be nice to remove with the profit, but I don't need profit anymore. I'm absolutely fine in terms of everything that happens, because I'll eventually remove Salah towards the end. So I think Saka will end up going. Probably looking at Garnacho to come in. I know that's really boring and basically makes my team identical to yours, Sam. But it just kind of makes the most sense. I do like the idea of Anthony Gordon as well, and eventually having Højlund compared to a Garnacho, to be honest with you. Just because, I mean, Palmer, Salah, Son, Foden, they're all staying for the rest of the season. Salah's not, but he's staying until 37. But Son, Foden, and Palmer definitely are, and Salah will just kind of stay there. So maybe it could be that I just leave Garnacho and eventually get Højlund, and that will be kind of the way I do it. And if I don't want to double up on United attack, so it could be Gordon, but one of Gordon or Garnacho I think will come in, and I think that the cells when they're going for Dalot. Whether I play Dalot this week is going to be a question too, because Gusto apparently is okay, but do I want double Chelsea defence? Probably not. So maybe I just play Dalot away at Bournemouth. But United defence isn't exactly filling me with joy. No, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it too much, as you can probably tell by me prevaricating over this. But yeah, really interesting stuff. What about you? How are you looking this week?
Yeah, so ever so slightly different. We're kind of heading towards the same end point, I think, but we're not quite there yet. So yeah, I am starting Gusto as it stands. Happy enough to bench a doggy away at Newcastle, I think, but that could go down to the wire. I do have Van Hecker in place, so Burnley away is a decent fixture. Happy enough starting him there. Although limited attacking upside. Garnacho at the moment is first bench. I've got 7 attackers I do like the look of, and if I do move either Saka or Darwin on, it would be for another player I'd be very happy starting this weekend. Probably Foden, possibly Gordon, or if it was Darwin moving out this week, which looks slightly less likely, Højlund as well. Again, Bournemouth away, not a bad fixture, and I'd probably favour the striker rather than the winger. So Garnacho is probably doomed to first sub with a really good fixture there. Outside of that, I do need to consider whether or not I want to get rid of Lascelles, but as it stands, most of the moves that I make, especially if it is the most likely one of Saka to Foden, if we get news or have confidence of Foden starting, I don't actually really have that much money spare to considerably upgrade Lascelles. So I might have to move someone else around instead. And that other player could end up being Darwin quite easily. So lots to think about. I'm not fully confident where I'm going to go yet, but it all kind of hinges on whether or not I have confidence in Foden getting good minutes. If I do, then that kind of triggers a little bit of a domino effect on who I can and can't sell this week. Whereas if I have no confidence and I'm happy enough holding Saka for another week, or I move it to Gordon, I can have a bit more fun with my second transfer, which I definitely want to make because I need to use it or lose it.
I'd like that. I think I'd go for the latter option, honestly, and just have a bit more fun with it. But Foden versus Luton, man. I feel like this is going to go right. You always go to the wire anyway, but I feel like this is going to go right to the wire for you. Because if you hear that Foden's likely to start versus Luton, it's going to be very difficult to really deal with that. And you don't have to deal with Anana, with the goalkeeper, for example, whereas I've got to think about that. You don't have to deal with a third striker, for example, because you'll buy someone in who's probably okay. So I think you can kind of delay Lascelles, honestly. I just get Foden sorted right now. And against Luton, there's just no way that you're going to be able to resist that. If he's starting, you know what, you'll be like, well, whatever. I'm just getting Foden. And so that would be my plan A, which I'm sure you've already kind of honed in on, basically.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I would like to bring in Gordon, save a bit of money, but realistically, looking around, what am I actually doing with that extra money? Like, I'm not going to be able to really upgrade Lascelles to someone that I'm massively confident in anyway. So what's really the benefit, especially when like the other idea is I just hold Lascelles and I can upgrade him straight to Trippier, who is the one other defender I would really want by game week 37. So I think that order of things makes sense. It does, however, mean that one of Gabriel or Darwin probably needs to go this week as well, though.
You know what I mean? You know what I think about selling Gabriel. So
yeah, I don't think I can do that. So Darwin could
hardly. Just think of all of the pain he's inflicted upon you as a Saints fan.
You know it's going to be the week he gets a bag, though. That's the problem.
I know, but what week is that? That's what we've been saying for the rest all year. That's why I didn't bother going that way. And speaking of that, in terms of AOB, just to bring us to the end of the pod, so Fans Football Fix have kindly commented on the stream, which is very kind of them. So close to you guys need to have sort of wager on the line here. Tom to open game week 1 podding in the Spurs kit if he loses, and Sam in a Pompey one if he does. I mean, it wouldn't bother me, but I think it would bother you a lot.
A little bit, especially because I've got a Saints flag right there. I don't think I'd ever live it down. Plus, I don't really go in for wagers, and that's not. I'm trying not to say this in a cowardly way, but I play differently if I know that there's something on the line like that, and I'd start making like silly moves that aren't the best for my team just to specifically beat you. And I don't really want to make it massively competitive between us anyway. So yeah, I mean, I'd actually be more tempted to say, oh, we'll just stick a tenner on it either way, rather than me wearing a Pompey kit, because I really, really hate that. But yeah, I mean, if that's what everyone wants, and if you're dying to do it, then I'm sure I can
No,
make an exception.
I'm definitely not. I think we've really said buying a pizza for our kind of pre-season thing for the summer as
Yeah, we'll do
the
that.
main thing, right? I think we'll go with that. I'm sorry, Fix, but I think that's kind of the way we do it. You come to the wrong pod if you want some sort of testosterone fueled situation going on.
There is one other option. We
What's
could.
that?
Are you going to FPL meets in game week 38?
I am. I'm not paying for drinks the whole night. Actually, no.
Not the whole night.
Hang on. Hang on. That would be really bad for you and great for me. Buy 2 pints. He's done. He's gone. He's disappeared. Oh, I've got trains to Newbury, mate. I've got to go. And I'll be like, oh well, yeah, I'm staying until midnight. So just leave your card with me. That'll be great. No, what were you thinking?
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. But not the whole night, but maybe a couple of rounds or something. As soon as the games finish. But it would be a lock. It would have to be like 1 or 2 rounds, and that's it.
Yeah. Just
or like the food at the end of the night, something like that.
Whatever. Yeah, just pay for my chicken cottage. Dear me. Right. Okay. On that note, I think we should probably end. Thanks very much for everybody for listening.
Yeah. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. Back to our full length, full fat pod of an hour and a half. So hopefully you've hung on in there with us and enjoyed 90 minutes of pure fantasy football chat once more. Thank you so much for listening if you have done so. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL or myself at FPL Pricey, and on Instagram or Threads at WGTA.FPL. Again, just FPL Pricey on there. If you did enjoy the pods, please do consider following us on those social channels. But also, if you could give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to it, or, of course, if you're watching along on YouTube, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam, for coming. And we hope you enjoy this pod as we get our knives out and prepare to slaughter our brave boys. Be back next Monday, I think it is. That's from the Chelsea game, isn't it? Yeah, so we'll be back at half-time next Monday, and we hope we assisted you. Have a great week. Speak to you soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?